The air in Stone Town, Zanzibar, hung heavy and humid, thick with the scent of cloves and the distant murmur of the Indian Ocean. It was the kind of heat that permeated everything, seeping into the stone walls of ancient buildings, warming the spice markets, and clinging to the skin. In this vibrant, intricate tapestry of cultures, Arab, Indian, African, and European, Farrokh Bulsara drew his first breath on a September morning in 1946. His parents, Bomi and Jair Bulsara, were Parsis, a small, ancient community whose roots stretched back to Persia, followers of the prophet Zoroaster. Their faith, with its emphasis on good thoughts, good words, and good deeds, was a quiet, guiding force in their lives, a stark counterpoint to the boisterous, sun-drenched chaos of the island. Farrokh's early years were steeped in the sensory richness of Zanzibar. He learned to navigate the labyrinthine alleyways, catching glimpses of ornate doorways and the flash of colorful fabrics. The sounds of the muezzin's call to prayer mingled with the chatter of merchants and the distant cries of gulls. His world was a kaleidoscope of taste: sweet dates, pungent curries, fresh mangoes, and the constant, rhythmic pulse of island life. Even then, a sensitive child with large, expressive eyes, he absorbed it all, a sponge soaking up the exotic beauty and underlying tension of a colonial outpost on the cusp of change. He was a quiet observer, though not without a spark of mischief, often found humming melodies he picked up from the radio or the street. As the 1950s dawned, a new chapter unfolded for the young boy. In 1954, at the tender age of 8, Farrokh was sent across the sea to St. Peter's School, a British-style boarding institution nestled amidst the lush, rolling hills of Pangani, India. The transition was abrupt, a jarring shift from the languid, vibrant chaos of Zanzibar to the structured, disciplined environment of a boarding school. The air here was cooler, crisper, carrying the scent of pine and distant tea plantations, a stark contrast to the tropical warmth he had known. He missed his family, the familiar comfort of his mother's presence, and the bustling streets of his childhood. Yet, within the strictures of school life, a new world began to open up. It was within the cool, quiet practice rooms of St. Peter's that Farrokh first truly discovered music. The piano, a grand, dark wooded instrument that seemed to hum with untold stories, became his sanctuary. His small fingers, nimble and eager, learned to coax melodies from the keys. He wasn't just playing notes, he was feeling them, translating the emotions that had always simmered beneath his quiet exterior into sound. He joined the school choir, his voice, though still boyish, possessing an unusual clarity and range. It wasn't long before his burgeoning talent led him to form his first band, the Hectics. They played early rock and roll, covering songs by Cliff Richard and Elvis Presley, their youthful energy echoing through the school halls. It was during these formative years, amongst his schoolmates, that the nickname, Freddie, first took hold, a casual abbreviation that would, unbeknownst to him, become synonymous with a legend. He was still Farrokh Bulsara, the Parsi boy from Zanzibar, but the seeds of Freddie, the performer, were being sown, nurtured by the discipline of his British education and the burgeoning stirrings of a unique artistic spirit. He was curious, intensely adaptable to his new surroundings, yet subtly beginning to forge an identity that, even then, challenged the quiet expectations of his family, finding immense joy and profound expression in the universal language of music. A decade later, in 1964, the world Freddie had known in Zanzibar shattered. The Zanzibar Revolution, a violent uprising, forced the Bulsara family to abandon their home and seek refuge. They relocated to Feltham, Middlesex, a suburb on the outskirts of London, England. The cultural shock was profound, a brutal awakening from the familiar rhythms of the East to the grey, often stark realities of post-war Britain. The air, perpetually damp and smelling of exhaust fumes and rain, felt alien. The vibrant colors of Zanzibar were replaced by the muted tones of brick houses and overcast skies. Farrokh, now 18, found himself adrift in a sea of unfamiliar customs, accents, and social codes. He was a stranger in a strange land, grappling with a profound sense of displacement. He enrolled at Isleworth Polytechnic, then, in 1966, gained admission to Ealing Art College, a bastion of bohemian creativity and experimental thought. This was where Freddie truly began to shed the remnants of his past and embrace the burgeoning counterculture of London. The college was a crucible of artistic ambition, a melting pot of eccentric personalities and radical ideas. Here, amidst the scent of turpentine and wet clay, he found a sense of belonging, a place where his own burgeoning eccentricity was not just tolerated but celebrated. He immersed himself in graphic design, meticulously honing his visual aesthetic, an innate understanding of presentation and spectacle already beginning to manifest. His fashion sense blossomed, evolving from the conservative attire of his youth to a bold, flamboyant style that drew attention: velvet jackets, flowing scarves, and brightly colored shirts. He was searching, experimenting with every facet of his identity, slightly insecure about his background but brimming with a burgeoning confidence in his artistic vision. He yearned to make his mark, to create something extraordinary. It was at Ealing that he befriended Tim Staffel, the lead singer of a band called Smile, and through Tim, he met the band's guitarist, Brian May, and drummer, Roger Taylor. They were kindred spirits, drawn together by a shared passion for music and a restless ambition. Freddie would spend hours watching Smile rehearse, offering suggestions, his critical eye already assessing their potential, his mind already formulating a grander vision. He saw the raw talent, the spark, and felt an undeniable pull towards them, an intuition that they were destined for something far greater than basement rehearsals. The grey skies of London had, paradoxically, provided the canvas for his most colourful transformation yet. The years following his graduation from Ealing Art College in 1969 were a period of intense, almost frantic, searching. Freddie bounced between various short-lived bands: Ibex, Wreckage, Sour Milk Sea, each a stepping stone, a crucible for honing his stage presence, his songwriting prowess, and his increasingly theatrical flair. He was a force of nature even then, captivating audiences in small, smoky clubs, his voice already hinting at its future power, his movements already infused with a nascent, magnetic charisma. He was driven by an unshakable belief in his own destiny, a conviction that he was meant for something monumental. When Tim Staffel, the lead singer of Smile, decided to leave the band in 1970, it wasn't just an opportunity, it felt like fate. Freddie, with his characteristic blend of charm and unwavering determination, didn't hesitate. He approached Brian May and Roger Taylor, his eyes alight with a vision so clear, so potent, that it was impossible to ignore. He didn't just want to join their band, he wanted to transform it. He proposed a new name, one that was regal, powerful, and provocative: Queen. He explained his reasoning with a flourish: "It's very regal, of course, and it sounds splendid. It's a strong name, very universal and immediate. I was certainly aware of the gay connotation, but that was just one facet of it." It was a bold statement, a declaration of intent. And then, he made another profound, symbolic choice. He officially adopted the surname Mercury, a nod to the swift, elusive Roman messenger god, a reflection of his own soaring ambition and perhaps, a subtle embrace of his own fluid identity. The final piece of the puzzle fell into place later that year when John Deacon, a quiet, unassuming bassist with a remarkable talent, joined the lineup. The four distinct personalities: Freddie's flamboyant showmanship, Brian's intellectual virtuosity, Roger's rock and roll swagger, and John's steady, grounding presence united under a singular, powerful vision. The atmosphere was intense, collaborative, full of raw energy and shared ambition, a sense of destiny forming around them. Freddie felt a powerful, almost fated, connection to his new bandmates and their shared musical direction. He was no longer just Farouk Bulsara, he was Freddie Mercury, the frontman of Queen, and the world was about to hear them roar. The grind began in earnest. In 1971, Queen secured a recording contract, a pivotal moment that launched them into the demanding world of professional music. They entered the studio to work on their debut album, Queen, a process marked by Freddie's relentless perfectionism and the band's collective struggle to distill their unique sound onto tape. The studio, a labyrinth of cables, microphones, and soundboards, became their second home. Hours stretched into days, days into weeks, as they meticulously crafted each track. Freddie, already a demanding taskmaster, would push himself and his bandmates to their limits, striving for an elusive sonic excellence. He had an uncanny ear, a vision for every vocal harmony, every guitar riff, every drum beat. The financial strain was palpable, a constant pressure hanging over them, but it was overshadowed by their shared artistic hunger. The album, a raw, powerful statement of their intent, was finally released in 1973, followed swiftly by Queen 2, a more ambitious, theatrical offering. They embarked on early tours, playing to enthusiastic but still relatively small crowds. The road was a brutal teacher, teaching them resilience, endurance, and the transformative power of live performance. Freddie, even in those nascent stages, was a revelation on stage, captivating audiences with his dynamic energy and burgeoning vocal range. Critics offered mixed but generally positive reviews, recognizing the band's immense potential. It was during this period of intense creative output and relentless touring that Freddie's relationship with Mary Austin deepened. She was a constant, steady presence amidst the chaos, a quiet anchor in his often tumultuous world. They lived together in a small apartment, sharing dreams and struggles, her unwavering support a balm to his restless spirit. Freddie found solace and stability in her companionship, a quiet harbor away from the demanding, exhilarating, and often gritty pursuit of artistic excellence. She was his confidant, his emotional touchstone, a beacon of normalcy in a life rapidly spiraling into the extraordinary. He was determined, resilient, experiencing the first taste of public adoration, but finding an essential emotional anchor and stability in Mary amidst the chaos and demanding schedule. The band's sound began to coalesce, their ambition growing with each release. 1974 saw the release of Sheer Heart Attack, an album that propelled them further into the public consciousness. Tracks like Killer Queen showcased Freddie's lyrical wit and the band's sophisticated arrangements, earning them their first major international hit. Their popularity surged, and the world began to sit up and take notice of this flamboyant, innovative quartet. But nothing, absolutely nothing, could have prepared them for what was to come. In 1975, Queen entered the studio to record A Night at the Opera, an album that would redefine their career and rock music itself. It was a monumental undertaking, a testament to their collective ambition and Freddie's boundless creative vision. The recording sessions were legendary, marked by meticulous layering, audacious experimentation, and Freddie's unwavering belief in pushing boundaries. He was consumed by the creation of one particular track, a sprawling, 6-minute epic that defied conventional song structure, Bohemian Rhapsody. It was a symphonic rock opera condensed into a single song, a masterpiece of vocal harmonies, sudden shifts in tempo, and an operatic middle section that seemed to come from another dimension. The record label initially balked, deeming it too long, too complex for radio play. But Freddie, with his characteristic stubbornness and conviction, refused to compromise. He knew what he had created. The release of Bohemian Rhapsody in October 1975 was nothing short of revolutionary. Its complex structure, innovative production, and groundbreaking music video a visual feast that seamlessly blended performance footage with surreal, multi-layered effects captivated the world. It wasn't just a song, it was an event, a cultural phenomenon. The song soared to the top of the charts globally, staying at number 1 for an unprecedented 9 weeks in the UK. Queen and Freddie Mercury were catapulted into superstardom overnight. The sheer scale of fame was overwhelming, an electric, almost dizzying reality after years of relentless struggle. The world was at their feet, millions of voices singing their praises, billions tuned in to their unique sound. Freddie was triumphant, exhilarated, grappling with the sudden explosion of fame and the immense responsibility it brought. He had achieved something truly monumental, a work of art that resonated across continents and generations. Yet, amidst the euphoria, there were the first subtle hints of the immense pressures to come, the gilded cage of celebrity beginning to form around the once searching Farouk Bulsara, now irrevocably Freddie Mercury, a name synonymous with global adoration and the thrilling, terrifying unknown. The roar of the crowd, a living, breathing entity, was a sound Freddie Mercury had come to crave, to depend on. It was a thunderous affirmation, a wave of adoration that washed over him night after night, city after city. After the seismic success of Bohemian Rhapsody, the world had not just opened up, it had surrendered. 1976 saw Queen release A Day at the Races, a deliberate, confident follow-up that cemented their global appeal. The critics, once hesitant, now lauded their theatricality and musical prowess. The touring became relentless, a dizzying carousel of private jets, 5-star hotels, and sold-out stadiums. From the grand, echoing halls of Madison Square Garden to the sun-drenched arenas of Japan, Freddie commanded every stage, every spotlight. He moved across the vast expanses of the stage with a dancer-esque grace and a predator-esque coiled power, his chest bared, his sequined costumes glittering under the hot lights. The microphone stand, a familiar extension of his arm, became a scepter, a weapon, a prop in his grand opera. Sweat glistened on his skin, reflecting the kaleidoscopic beams that sliced through the smoky air. He could taste the metallic tang of his own exertion, the electric charge of thousands of voices singing in unison, the heady perfume of anticipation and release. Each performance was an exquisite act of communion, a shared hysteria that left him simultaneously drained and utterly invigorated. He was the ringmaster, the sorcerer, weaving a spell over billions. In 1977, News of the World landed, an album that gifted the world with two anthems that transcended mere rock songs. We Will Rock You, and We Are the Champions, became universal rallying cries, stadium-shaking hymns that echoed from sports arenas to protest lines. Freddie's public persona solidified into that of a powerful, flamboyant rock god, an image he had meticulously crafted, a dazzling shield against the boy from Zanzibar. He reveled in the adoration, the sheer power of his voice reaching into the furthest corners of a stadium, the collective gasp when he held a note for an impossible length of time. Yet, beneath the glittering veneer, a subtle strain began to manifest. The constant demands of performance, the endless travel, the unblinking eye of the media, the pressure to always be on, always be magnificent, began to take their toll. He felt the weight of his own creation, the persona he had so carefully built, pressing down on him. The gilded cage of fame, so beautiful from the outside, felt increasingly confining. He was confident, powerful, enjoying every pulse-pounding moment of adoration, but the quiet moments in hotel rooms, the hushed corridors after the applause died, revealed a growing chasm between the meticulously crafted public image and his private, evolving desires. A restlessness stirred within him, a nascent longing for something undefined, something beyond the blinding lights and roaring crowds. The year 1978 brought with it the release of the Jazz album, a record that, true to its name, was an eclectic and often provocative mix. Tracks like Bicycle Race, with its famously nude cycling video, sparked controversy and delighted in challenging societal norms, a reflection of Freddie's own burgeoning desire to push boundaries. But away from the studio and the stage, a more profound, personal exploration was unfolding within him. The subtle shifts in his private life, once mere whispers, began to take on a more defined shape. He had always been drawn to beauty, to the unconventional, to the exquisite freedom of the artistic spirit. Now, that curiosity was turning inward, illuminating aspects of himself he had long kept veiled. His sexuality, a complex, fluid landscape, began to demand more open acknowledgement. Mary Austin remained his bedrock, his constant. Their bond was deep, forged in the fires of their early struggles and the dizzying ascent to fame. She understood him, saw through the bravado to the sensitive soul beneath. But the unspoken truths between them, the growing emotional distance, became a quiet hum in their shared life. He still loved her fiercely, but it was a love that was evolving, transforming into something more akin to familial devotion than romantic partnership. He was navigating a complex emotional terrain, pulled by an undeniable current towards a different, more liberated life. The London apartment they shared, once a sanctuary, began to feel less like a home and more like a beautifully appointed shell. By 1979, the need for space, for an independent life that reflected his evolving self, became paramount. Freddie moved into his own apartment in Stafford Terrace, a significant step towards a more open, albeit still intensely private, existence. The air in his new home felt lighter, imbued with a nascent sense of freedom. It was around this time that Paul Prenter, who had joined as his personal assistant a couple of years prior, began to exert a subtle, then increasingly significant, influence over Freddie's personal and professional life. Prenter was charming, efficient, and seemed to anticipate Freddie's every need. He became a gatekeeper, a filter, managing schedules, vetting calls, and slowly, imperceptibly, shaping Freddie's social circle. There was a sense of personal awakening for Freddie, a yearning to explore the uncharted territories of his desires, but tinged with a nascent loneliness, a quiet understanding that these new paths might lead him away from the familiar comforts of his past. He was curious, restless, seeking new experiences, feeling a powerful pull towards a different, more liberated life, navigating the complex emotional terrain with Mary and his inner circle, all while the relentless public glare continued to demand the flawless performance of Freddie Mercury. The new decade dawned with Queen's The Game in 1980, an album that marked a slight departure in their sound, embracing a more American rock sensibility. Another One Bites the Dust, with its infectious bassline and funk-infused rhythm, became a colossal hit, particularly in the United States, proving Queen's versatility and cementing their status as global innovators. But as Queen conquered America, Freddie found himself increasingly drawn across the channel, to Munich. The Bavarian capital, with its vibrant nightlife and burgeoning gay scene, offered him a sense of freedom and anonymity he couldn't find in London. The air there felt different, less judgmental, more permissive. He could shed the heavy mantle of Freddie Mercury, rock god, and simply be. Munich became his haven, a playground for hedonistic pursuits and personal discovery. The nights were a blur of pulsating disco lights, throbbing bass, and the intoxicating scent of champagne and cigarettes. He embraced the decadence, the exhilarating rush of living fully, without apology. He found a sense of personal validation there, a space where he could explore his desires openly, unburdened by the relentless scrutiny of the British press or the quiet expectations of his Parsi heritage. He laughed louder, danced harder, and allowed himself to be seen in ways he never had before. 1981 brought the release of Queen's Greatest Hits album, a monumental collection that showcased their extraordinary output. The same year, a collaboration with the iconic David Bowie resulted in Under Pressure, a masterpiece born from an impromptu jam session, its raw energy and soaring vocals a testament to two titans of music colliding. Yet, even amidst these creative triumphs, Paul Prenter's influence continued to grow, becoming increasingly pronounced. He was always there, a shadow at Freddie's side, managing his affairs, often acting as an intermediary between Freddie and the other members of Queen. Prenter's presence created a subtle but effective buffer, subtly isolating Freddie from his long-standing support system. The bandmates, accustomed to direct communication, found themselves increasingly going through Prenter, a dynamic that began to sow seeds of unease. Freddie, caught in the intoxicating whirl of Munich's liberation and Prenter's efficient management, felt a sense of escape, but a growing internal conflict simmered beneath the surface, a potential for recklessness in his choices that he was not yet fully aware of. The decadent, exhilarating atmosphere was a haven for personal freedom, yet it was also subtly isolating him from the very people who had been with him from the beginning. The tensions within Queen, once simmering, began to boil over in 1982 with the release of Hot Space. The album marked a significant departure from their signature sound, delving deep into funk, disco, and electronic music. It was Freddie's vision, an attempt to push boundaries and explore new sonic landscapes, but it was met with mixed reviews and, more importantly, created palpable friction within the band. Brian May and Roger Taylor, rooted in their rock sensibilities, struggled with the new direction. The recording sessions were strained, arguments over musical choices becoming more frequent, the air thick with unspoken frustrations. Freddie, however, remained resolute, convinced of his artistic path. His public image, meanwhile, became even more flamboyant, more exaggerated. On stage, he was a shimmering, defiant peacock, his costumes bolder, his movements more theatrical. But in his private life, a stark contrast emerged. He became more guarded, retreating further into his opulent, increasingly insular world, often accompanied solely by Paul Prenter. The once open lines of communication with his bandmates and other close friends began to fray. Calls went unanswered, invitations declined. He was less accessible, wrapped in a protective cocoon woven by Prenter, who skillfully managed who could reach Freddie and when. 1983 was a period of intense personal turmoil, a quiet storm brewing beneath the surface of his glamorous life. Freddie retreated further, finding solace in escapism, in the fleeting pleasures of his Munich life, and in the company of those who indulged his every whim. He felt misunderstood, perhaps overwhelmed by the relentless demands of fame, the constant need to innovate, to surprise, to perform. There was a nascent paranoia regarding his privacy, a growing suspicion about who he could truly trust, a feeling exacerbated by Prenter's constant presence and subtle manipulation of information. The growing friction within Queen over musical direction and Freddie's perceived detachment created a chasm between them, a silent wedge driven deeper by Prenter's increasingly powerful influence. The atmosphere was tense, opulent, yet increasingly insular, a stark contrast between public spectacle and private retreat, marked by growing internal discord and external pressures that threatened to splinter the very foundation of Queen. The world eagerly awaited Queen's next move, and in 1984, the works delivered. It was a return to their rock roots, featuring anthems like Radio Gaga, which quickly became a global hit. But it was the music video for I Want to Break Free that truly captured the zeitgeist and, inadvertently, sparked controversy. The video featured the band members in drag, a playful homage to a popular British soap opera. While it was celebrated in the UK and Europe, it was met with outrage and outright bans in the more conservative US market, where it was perceived as a mockery of gender roles. Freddie, ever the provocateur, found a perverse delight in the uproar, yet the incident highlighted the growing chasm between his artistic freedom and the often rigid expectations of a global audience. Throughout this period, Freddie's relationship with Paul Prenter reached its zenith. Prenter was no longer just an assistant, he was a confidant, a constant companion, a gatekeeper who controlled access to Freddie's inner sanctum. He managed Freddie's personal finances, orchestrated his social life, and filtered his communications, subtly isolating him further from his bandmates and older friends. Freddie, perhaps weary of the constant demands and the weight of his own celebrity, had allowed Prenter to become indispensable, a shield against the world. He trusted him implicitly, a trust that would soon prove to be devastatingly misplaced. The year 1985, however, would bring a brutal, seismic shift. As Queen prepared for what would become their legendary performance at Live Aid, a moment poised to redefine their legacy, Freddie received news that would shatter his world and ignite a fierce, righteous anger within him. Paul Prenter, the man he had trusted, the man who had become his shadow, had betrayed him in the most egregious way possible. Prenter had sold intimate, private stories about Freddie's personal life, his relationships, and his indulgences, to the British tabloid press. The headlines screamed, salacious and demeaning, exposing Freddie's most vulnerable moments for public consumption. The revelation hit Freddie like a physical blow. The air in his opulent London home seemed to thicken with the weight of betrayal. He felt violated, exposed, his carefully constructed privacy ripped to shreds. The anger was a cold, searing fire in his gut, a fury born not just of indignation, but of a profound sense of hurt. He confronted Prenter, the scene undoubtedly volatile, charged with the raw emotion of a friendship utterly destroyed. The decision was swift, decisive, and absolute. Prenter was out. Fired, banished from his life, his influence utterly severed. It was a painful realization of the cost of misplaced trust, a stark reminder that even within his closest circle, danger lurked. Freddie Mercury, hurt, angry, and deeply betrayed, but also empowered by the decision to remove such a toxic influence from his life, stood on the precipice of a grand public resurgence. He was clearing the decks, preparing for Live Aid with a renewed sense of purpose, a steely caution, and a quiet determination to reclaim his narrative. The world was about to witness not just a performance, but a declaration. The summer of 1985 pulsed with a different kind of electricity. The sting of Paul Prenter's betrayal still lingered, a bitter aftertaste, but it had been swiftly cauterized. Freddie Mercury stood on the precipice of a new stage, not just Wembley, but the global arena of Live Aid, and he was determined to transform that personal wound into a public triumph. The air in the vast stadium on July 13, 1985, was a thick, shimmering curtain of heat and human anticipation, a palpable hum that vibrated deep in the chest. Over 70,000 souls packed into Wembley, another billion watching across television screens worldwide, all waiting. They had come for a cause, for charity, but they also waited for him. Backstage, the usual pre-show jitters were magnified a thousandfold. The other bands, some legends, some rising stars, moved with a nervous energy, but Freddie, cloaked in a white vest and tight jeans, a studded armband gleaming on his bicep, possessed a quiet, almost predatory focus. He felt the weight of the moment, the immense expectation, but it was a weight he was born to carry. He ran a hand over his meticulously groomed mustache, a familiar gesture. The betrayal had stripped him raw, but in doing so, it had also clarified his purpose. He was here to remind the world who he was, who Queen was. He was here to reclaim his narrative, not with words, but with a roar. The moment arrived. The familiar strains of Bohemian Rhapsody filled the stadium, not as a live performance, but as a prelude, a tantalizing promise. Then, the four figures of Queen strode onto the stage, bathed in the blinding white light of the Klieg lamps. The roar that erupted from the crowd was physical, a tsunami of sound that hit Freddie full force, washing away any lingering doubt, any shred of insecurity. This was his element. He gripped the microphone, his eyes sweeping across the sea of faces, a kaleidoscope of hope and adoration. He tasted the dry, metallic tang of adrenaline, the scent of hot stage lights, sweat, and the distant, earthy smell of the turf. What followed was not merely a performance, it was a masterclass in showmanship, a 20-minute distillation of everything Queen stood for. From the opening chords of Bohemian Rhapsody, through the playful call and response of Radio Gaga, Freddie was utterly transcendent. He moved with an effortless grace, a dancer and a boxer combined, his body a conduit for the music. His voice, a 4-octave marvel, soared and dipped, a velvet hammer one moment, a silken caress the next. He pounded the piano keys with furious passion, then, with a flick of his wrist, transformed into a strutting peacock, commanding the space with an almost supernatural magnetism. During Radio Gaga, as he led the synchronized clap, the entire stadium became a single, unified organism, hands rising and falling in perfect rhythm. It was a moment of profound, collective experience, a shared heartbeat. He saw not just individual faces, but a vast, loving entity, responding to his every gesture, his every note. The connection was visceral, exhilarating, a powerful antidote to the years of internal strife and the recent sting of betrayal. He was vindicated not by critics, but by the sheer, unadulterated love pouring from millions. He felt a deep, almost spiritual communion, a restoration of purpose that settled deep in his bones. As they launched into "We Will Rock You" and "We Are the Champions," the sheer power of the crowd singing along, their voices echoing off the stadium walls, was overwhelming. It was a triumphant reaffirmation, a silencing of all doubts, a solidification of his place as a rock legend, not just for a moment, but for all time. The final bow, the wave to the ecstatic crowd, was tinged with a profound sense of having achieved something monumental, a powerful belonging restored after years of personal and professional turbulence. He walked off stage, sweat-drenched and breathless, but utterly exhilarated, the thunderous applause still ringing in his ears, a sweet, sweet victory. The euphoria of Live Aid was a powerful current, but beneath its shimmering surface, Freddie began to chart new waters. The immediate aftermath of such a global triumph might have led many to double down on their established path, but for Freddie, it was a catalyst for exploration. He had proved Queen's enduring power, now he craved a different kind of artistic freedom. 1985 also marked the release of his first solo album, Mr. Bad Guy. It was a deliberate departure from Queen's bombastic rock, a foray into the synthpop and disco influences he had been exploring, a chance to express a more personal, perhaps more vulnerable, side of himself. The album cover, a striking image of Freddie in a more introspective pose, hinted at the internal landscape he was eager to share. In the studio, away from the collective decisions of the band, he reveled in the autonomy, meticulously crafting each track, pouring his individual desires and frustrations into the melodies and lyrics. It allowed him to stretch, to experiment, to indulge musical avenues that didn't quite fit the Queen mold. But more significant than any musical venture, 1985 also brought a different kind of new beginning into his life, one that would offer a profound and lasting sense of peace. It was in the unlikeliest of places, a gay club in London, that Freddie Mercury met Jim Hutton. Jim, a quiet, unassuming hairdresser, was initially unimpressed by the rock star's advances. There was a refreshing lack of fanfare about Jim, a groundedness that stood in stark contrast to the dazzling, often chaotic, world Freddie inhabited. Their first encounter was brief, almost forgettable, but a seed had been planted. Months later, they met again, and this time, something clicked. Their relationship began quietly, away from the flashing cameras and the relentless scrutiny. Jim was a man of simple pleasures, content with gardening, with the rhythm of ordinary life. He wasn't dazzled by Freddie's fame, he saw the man beneath the legend. For Freddie, who had navigated a world where people constantly wanted something from him, Jim was a revelation. He offered genuine companionship, a steady hand, and an unconditional love untainted by ambition or expectation. Garden Lodge, Freddie's Grand Kensington home, had always been a sanctuary, but with Jim, it transformed into a true home, imbued with a new sense of domesticity. The scent of fresh-cut flowers from Jim's meticulous gardening mingled with the rich aroma of Freddie's favorite perfumes. The quiet mornings, the shared cups of tea, the simple act of watching television together, these were the moments that grounded Freddie, offering a profound sense of emotional security he hadn't fully known before. He felt content, creatively stimulated by his solo work, but more importantly, he felt loved, truly and deeply, in a way that offered stability after years of intense public scrutiny and personal tumult. Jim was not just a lover, he was a partner, a quiet anchor in the often turbulent sea of Freddie's life, a source of quiet happiness that settled deep into his soul. The triumphant roar of Live Aid and the quiet contentment of his new relationship with Jim Hutton formed a beautiful, fragile balance. In 1986, Queen released A Kind of Magic, an album largely serving as the soundtrack to the film, Highlander. It spawned several more hits and led to the Magic Tour, a spectacular, stadium-filling odyssey across Europe. This tour, a dazzling display of Freddie's unparalleled showmanship, would unknowingly become his last major tour with the band. Night after night, he commanded colossal crowds, his voice as powerful and electrifying as ever, his stage presence undiminished. He flew over audiences on a cherry picker, his cape billowing, a true rock god. The adulation was immense, the concerts legendary, but behind the scenes, a subtle, disquieting shift was occurring. Freddie, always lean, began to appear increasingly gaunt. His cheekbones grew more pronounced, his frame thinner. The vibrant energy he poured onto the stage seemed to drain him more profoundly off it. Whispers began to circulate, hushed questions among the crew and close friends. He dismissed them with characteristic bravado, blaming the rigors of touring, the endless schedule, the demanding performances. "Just tired, darling," he'd quip, waving a dismissive hand, a brave smile fixed firmly in place. But the denials felt increasingly hollow, even to himself. The foreboding atmosphere was a stark and heartbreaking contrast between the public adoration and a devastating, life-altering private truth that was slowly, inexorably, revealing itself. The hammer blow fell in 1987. The memory of the moment would forever be etched in Freddie's mind, a stark, clinical image against the vibrant tapestry of his life. The hushed tones of the doctor, the sterile scent of the clinic, the weight of the words, AIDS. It was a death sentence, delivered with an almost detached professionalism. Freddie sat there, the world tilting on its axis, the roar of the crowds replaced by a deafening silence in his own head. Shock, then a cold, creeping fear, seized him. The diagnosis was devastating, a profound betrayal by his own body. His immediate, visceral reaction was to shield those he loved, to maintain his dignity, to control the narrative of his own life, even as it was slipping from his grasp. The decision was made swiftly, with a steely resolve. The illness would be a closely guarded secret. He would tell Jim, of course, his partner, his rock. And Mary, his lifelong confidant, his common-law wife, who had seen him through every triumph and every tribulation. His closest assistants, Joe Finelli and Peter Freestone, would also become privy to the terrible truth, forming an impenetrable inner circle of trust and silence. Even his beloved bandmates, Brian, Roger, and John, were initially kept in the dark, a painful but necessary choice, he believed, to protect them and to allow Queen to continue without the crushing weight of public sympathy or morbid curiosity. The burden of this secret was immense, a heavy cloak he wore every waking moment. The public saw the flamboyant rock god, still denying rumors, still radiating an aura of invincibility. But beneath the brave and defiant public facade, Freddie was grappling with a terminal illness, a deep sense of vulnerability, and a crushing fear of the unknown. He was devastated, fearful, yet determined to maintain his privacy and dignity, even as his body began its slow, relentless decline. The triumph and foreboding walked hand in hand, a cruel paradox in his gilded life. Even as the devastating diagnosis cast a long shadow over his private world, Freddie's artistic spirit refused to be extinguished. If anything, it burned brighter, fueled by a new, fierce urgency. In 1987, a lifelong dream began to take shape, a collaboration with the legendary Spanish operatic soprano, Montserrat Caballé. Freddie had always harbored a deep love for opera, a fascination with its theatricality, its raw emotional power, and the sheer vocal prowess required. Caballé, with her stratospheric range and commanding stage presence, was his idol. The idea of fusing the worlds of rock and opera, two seemingly disparate genres, was audacious, revolutionary, and utterly Freddie. The initial meetings were a blend of awe and excitement. Freddie, usually so confident, was almost shy in the presence of the formidable soprano. But their shared passion for music quickly broke down any barriers. The studio sessions for the Barcelona album became a sanctuary, a place where the grim realities of his health could be momentarily forgotten. The air in the recording booth, usually thick with the scent of coffee and stale cigarettes, now resonated with the soaring power of two extraordinary voices intertwining. Freddie poured every ounce of his creative energy into the project, meticulously crafting the melodies, his lyrics imbued with a new depth and poignancy. He worked tirelessly, driven by an inner clock that ticked louder with each passing day. He was racing against time, determined to achieve this artistic milestone, to leave a lasting mark that transcended genres. The release of Barcelona in 1988 was met with widespread critical acclaim, a groundbreaking fusion that defied expectations. The title track, a powerful anthem, became an instant classic. The culmination of this ambitious project was its memorable performance at the La Nit Festival in Barcelona, a grand spectacle held in front of the magic fountain of Montjuic. Freddie, though visibly thinner, stood alongside Caballé, his voice reaching dizzying heights, his stage presence undimmed. He sang with an intensity born of both joy and a quiet desperation, a powerful testament to his artistic ambition and resilience. The crowd, a sea of adoring faces, was captivated by the sheer audacity and beauty of the performance. For Freddie, it was a profound act of defiance against his illness, a statement that his art would not be silenced, that his spirit remained unbroken. He was inspired, driven, finding solace and purpose through his music, demonstrating immense courage and determination in the face of his encroaching mortality. The grand, passionate atmosphere of the collaboration was creatively fulfilling, imbued with a sense of urgency and profound dedication that pushed him to new heights. As the decade drew to a close, the relentless march of Freddie's illness became increasingly difficult to conceal. 1989 saw the release of Queen's album, The Miracle. The title, in retrospect, felt tragically ironic. The music was as vibrant and powerful as ever, but the accompanying music videos and interviews began to reveal the undeniable truth. Freddie's increasingly frail appearance, his hollowed cheeks, and the visible effort it took for him to maintain his usual energetic persona, intensified media speculation. The tabloids, ever ravenous, printed increasingly cruel and invasive stories, dissecting his every public move. He continued to deflect, to deny, to offer carefully crafted explanations, but the charade was becoming exhausting. The most painful decision came with the realization that touring was no longer an option. The Magic Tour had been his last. The conversations with Brian, Roger, and John were difficult, fraught with unspoken understanding. Freddie, ever the protector of the band's image, insisted on the official reason being a desire for a break, a shift in focus. But the truth hung heavy in the air, a silent, somber acknowledgement of his declining health. The end of touring marked the end of an era, a profound shift in Queen's trajectory, and a quiet, heartbreaking farewell to the exhilarating communion of live performance. By 1990, public appearances became exceedingly rare. Freddie retreated almost entirely to Garden Lodge, his beautiful Kensington sanctuary, which now served as a quiet, opulent hospice. The vibrant colors of the house, the lush gardens, became a poignant backdrop to his dwindling strength. His days were spent in the quiet company of Jim, Mary, Joe Finelli, and Peter Freestone. This small, devoted circle became his world, shielding him from the outside, tending to his every need, and offering unwavering love and support. The air in the house was often somber, yet permeated with a quiet intensity of creation. Despite his escalating pain and exhaustion, Freddie's commitment to music remained absolute, a singular, burning focus. The band began working on Innuendo, what would become their final album with Freddie. He would arrive at the studio, often frail and visibly unwell, sometimes needing assistance to stand, yet the moment the recording light went on, something miraculous happened. The voice, his magnificent, unparalleled voice, would emerge, strong and clear, imbued with an almost otherworldly power. He would record in short bursts, sometimes lying down between takes, conserving every ounce of energy for those precious moments in front of the microphone. He knew his time was limited, and he was determined to pour every last drop of his soul into his art, to leave behind a legacy that would speak for itself. He was resigned yet profoundly resolute, focused entirely on his artistic legacy, finding immense strength and purpose in his work and the unwavering support of his closest companions, quietly accepting his fate with a dignity that bordered on the sublime. The music became his testament, his final, unspoken farewell. The grand, ornate gates of Garden Lodge, usually a shield against the clamor of the outside world, felt heavier than ever in 1991. Inside, the quiet intensity of creation continued, a poignant counterpoint to the encroaching silence that Freddie Mercury felt gathering around him. The recording of Innuendo, what would become Queen's final album with him, was not merely a series of studio sessions, it was an act of profound, almost religious, devotion. The air in Mountain Studios, nestled by the serene expanse of Lake Geneva, was often thick with unspoken emotion, a quiet reverence clinging to the mixing desk and microphone stands. Freddie would arrive, a shadow of his former vibrant self. His once robust frame was now painfully gaunt, clothes hanging loosely on him. The vibrant color had drained from his skin, leaving it translucent, almost ethereal. Yet, as he settled into the chair before the microphone, a transformation would occur. The exhaustion in his eyes would recede, replaced by a fierce, almost incandescent, focus. He would signal to the engineers, a slight nod, a flicker of his gaze, and then, the red light would glow. And out of that frail body, a voice, miraculous and undiminished, would emerge. It was a testament to sheer, unyielding will. He would sing, often in single, powerful takes, pouring every last drop of his soul into the lyrics. Brian May, Roger Taylor, and John Deacon would watch from the control room, their faces etched with a mixture of awe, sorrow, and profound respect. They heard not just notes, but a lifetime of passion, defiance, and vulnerability in every phrase. The studio became a sacred space, a crucible where pain was transmuted into art, where the impending farewell was woven into the very fabric of the music. One particular session stood out, a moment etched into the collective memory of the band. It was for the track, "The Show Must Go On." The lyrics, penned by Brian, spoke of an unyielding spirit in the face of adversity, a performer's unwavering commitment to their craft, even as their strength failed. "My soul is painted like the wings of butterflies. Fairy tales of yesterday will grow but never die. I can fly, my friends." Freddie listened, his eyes closed, the words resonating with his own secret battle. He knew, as did the others, that these lyrics were not merely metaphorical, they were his truth. Brian had initially doubted if Freddie could manage the demanding vocal range, his voice ravaged by the illness. But Freddie, with a wave of his hand and a defiant sip of vodka, had insisted. "All bloody do it, darling," he'd rasped, a flicker of his old fire in his eyes. And he did. He stood before the microphone, drawing on a reserve of power that seemed to come from beyond himself. His voice soared, raw and majestic, hitting every note with an impossible clarity, imbued with a poignancy that brought tears to the eyes of those listening. It was an act of pure, unadulterated will, a final, magnificent declaration against the dying of the light. Each word, each sustained note, was a profound statement, revealing his personal battle without explicitly stating it, a courageous whisper to the world that he would not go gently. He was exhausted, yes, but artistically fulfilled, demonstrating immense courage and a singular focus, pouring his very soul into his final works, achieving a quiet, dignified acceptance of the inevitable end. The air, usually clinical in its neutrality, felt heavy with unspoken farewells, a sense of profound artistic closure. When Innuendo was finally released in 1991, it was met with immediate critical acclaim. Fans worldwide devoured the album, recognizing its power, its depth, and its undeniable musical brilliance. But they also observed, with growing concern, Freddie's physical transformation in the accompanying music videos. His gaunt face, his increasingly fragile movements, fueled a fresh wave of speculation about his health. The tabloids, ever eager for a story, intensified their relentless pursuit, their cameras flashing, their headlines screaming questions he could no longer deflect with his usual bravado. The public watched, fascinated and horrified, as their rock god seemed to diminish before their very eyes. They saw the courage in his gaze, the defiance in his voice, but they also saw the undeniable truth of a body betraying a magnificent spirit. The burden of secrecy had been an immense weight, a cloak he had worn for years, suffocating him with its silence. But by the autumn of 1991, as his health rapidly deteriorated, the charade became unbearable. The physical pain was constant, an unyielding companion, but the emotional strain of maintaining the elaborate deception was equally crippling. He looked at Jim, his steadfast partner, whose quiet strength had been his anchor. He looked at Mary, his lifelong confidant, her eyes mirroring his unspoken sorrow. He looked at Joe and Peter, his devoted assistants, who had witnessed his decline with heartbreaking intimacy. He knew it was time. The moment of truth, a profound and terrifying vulnerability, had arrived. The decision was not made lightly. It was a conversation held in the hushed elegance of Garden Lodge, the scent of late autumn roses drifting in through the windows. Freddie, propped up in his bed, his voice weak but resolute, articulated his wishes. He wanted control, one last act of defiance against the disease that was consuming him. He would tell the world. He would strip away the rumors, the whispers, the invasive speculation, and replace them with his own truth. He would choose how his story would end, or at least, how this chapter would be publicly closed. The relief that washed over him, even amidst the fear, was palpable. He felt a cleansing, a release from the enormous pressure he had carried alone for so long. On November 23, 1991, a carefully worded official statement was released to the press. It was concise, dignified, and devastating. Following the enormous conjecture in the press over the last 2 weeks, I wish to confirm that I have been tested HIV positive and have AIDS. I felt it correct to keep this information private to protect the privacy of those around me. However, the time has now come for my friends and fans around the world to know the truth. I hope that everyone will join with me, my doctors and all those worldwide in the fight against this terrible disease. the world reacted with a collective gasp of shock, sadness, and an outpouring of sympathy that transcended geographical and cultural boundaries. Newspaper headlines screamed the news across every continent, television channels interrupted broadcasts, and radio stations played Queen's music in an endless loop. The global icon, the flamboyant showman, had finally revealed his most profound vulnerability. The reaction was not one of judgment, but of overwhelming sorrow and respect for his courage. Tributes poured in from fellow musicians, from world leaders, from millions of ordinary fans whose lives he had touched. The silence around his illness, once a heavy burden, was now replaced by a wave of communal grief and understanding. Freddie, relieved of the immense burden of secrecy, felt a quiet dignity settle over him. He was prepared for what was to come, finding a measure of peace in this final, courageous act of honesty. The air, once thick with rumor, was now solemn, momentous, a profound moment of truth, vulnerability, and immense courage shared with the world, met with an overwhelming wave of public emotion. The final hours at Garden Lodge were imbued with a quiet, profound dignity. The grand Victorian house, usually alive with laughter and music, was now hushed, filled with the gentle presence of those Freddie held dearest. The scent of lavender and antiseptic mingled in the air, a somber perfume. Jim Hutton was there, his hand gently holding Freddie's, a silent promise of enduring love. Mary Austin, her face streaked with tears, sat by his bedside, a lifetime of shared memories passing between their eyes. Joe Finelli and Peter Freestone moved quietly through the rooms, their devotion absolute, their grief already a heavy cloak. The London rain, a soft, persistent whisper against the windows, seemed to weep with them. As dawn broke on November 24, 1991, Freddie Mercury passed away peacefully. He was 45 years old. The exact time was 6:48 p.m. His final breath was taken in the comfort of his own bed, surrounded by the love that had sustained him through his most private struggles. The quiet dignity of his passing was a testament to the strength of his spirit, even in its final moments. The news spread like wildfire, a devastating shockwave across the globe. The phone calls began, hushed and tearful, as Jim and Mary delivered the crushing news to Brian, Roger, and John, to Freddie's parents, Bomi and Jer, and his sister, Kashmira. Each call was a fresh wave of agony, a confirmation of the immense void left by his absence. The world reacted with an outpouring of grief unseen since the death of John Lennon. News coverage dominated headlines for days, filled with photographs of Freddie at his most flamboyant, his most powerful, juxtaposed with the stark reality of his final battle. Tributes poured in from every corner of the earth. Elton John, David Bowie, Montserrat Caballé, all expressed their profound sorrow and admiration. Fans gathered outside Garden Lodge, leaving flowers, candles, and heartfelt messages, transforming the quiet residential street into a spontaneous shrine. The air was thick with collective mourning, a sense of immense global loss for a cultural icon. 3 days later, on November 27, a private funeral service was held, a solemn, intimate affair conducted according to Zoroastrian rites. Freddie, ever protective of his privacy, had ensured that his final farewell would be a quiet one. Only a small circle of close friends and family gathered at Kensal Green Cemetery. The ancient Parsi prayers, chanted in Avestan, filled the chapel, a poignant echo of his heritage. Mary Austin, Jim Hutton, his parents, his sister, and the remaining members of Queen sat together, united in their grief, remembering the man behind the legend. There were no cameras, no public spectacle, just a quiet dignity, a profound love, and a heartbreaking farewell to the extraordinary soul who had touched so many lives. For those around him, it was a time of raw, immediate grief, a dawning realization of the immense void left by his absence, and the beginning of a long, painful process of processing his profound impact and their personal loss. The world mourned the public figure, but this small circle mourned their Farouk, their Freddie, their friend, their lover, their son, their brother. In the immediate wake of his death, the world seemed to hold its breath, then, in a collective act of remembrance, embraced his music anew. In 1992, Bohemian Rhapsody was re-released, an almost sacred anthem, and once again, it soared to #1 on the charts, a poignant testament to his enduring musical power. It was as if the world needed to hear his voice again, to feel the comfort and exhilaration he had always provided. The song, already a legend, took on an even deeper resonance, a powerful echo of the man who had created it. But the legacy of Freddie Mercury was not just in his music, it was also in the brutal honesty of his final announcement. His courage had shone a harsh, necessary light on AIDS, stripping away some of the stigma and fear that surrounded the disease. Brian May, Roger Taylor, and John Deacon, grappling with their profound loss, knew they had to honor him, not just as a musician, but as a catalyst for change. The idea for a tribute concert began to form, a monumental undertaking that would celebrate his life and raise awareness and funds for AIDS research. On April 29, 1992, Wembley Stadium, the very stage where Freddie had delivered his most iconic performance at Live Aid, once again opened its gates. The atmosphere was different this time, tinged with a solemn reverence, yet also vibrant with a powerful sense of community and celebration. Over 70,000 fans, many wearing yellow jackets and Queen t-shirts, filled the stadium, a sea of faces united in their love for Freddie. Billions more watched on television, a global audience once again captivated by the spirit of Queen. The Freddie Mercury tribute concert for AIDS awareness was a star-studded event, a testament to the respect and admiration Freddie had commanded from his peers. The biggest names in music graced the stage: Elton John, David Bowie, George Michael, Annie Lennox, Robert Plant, Liza Minnelli, Metallica, Guns N' Roses, and many more. Each artist, in their own unique way, paid homage to the irreplaceable talent of Freddie Mercury, performing Queen's songs with passion and heartfelt emotion. The remaining members of Queen, Brian, Roger, and John, were the anchor, performing with a rotating cast of vocalists, their faces a mixture of grief and fierce determination to honor their brother. The sight of Wembley, alive with music and memory, was profoundly moving. It was a celebration of life, a defiant roar against the silence of death, and a powerful call to action in the fight against AIDS. Tears flowed freely among the audience and on stage, but so did laughter and a joyful communion in the power of music. The concert was a resounding success, raising millions for AIDS research and awareness, ensuring that Freddie's final, courageous act of honesty would continue to resonate, transforming tragedy into a powerful force for good. Freddie Mercury, the boy from Zanzibar who became a global phenomenon, had left an indelible mark on the world. His music, his voice, his flamboyant spirit, his courage in the face of death all combined to create a legacy that transcended mere entertainment. He taught the world to embrace individuality, to live with passion, and to never let the show stop. His life was a symphony of contradictions: flamboyant yet intensely private, powerful yet vulnerable, a rock god with the heart of an opera singer. He was, and remains, a true original, a meteor that blazed across the firmament of popular culture, leaving behind a trail of stardust that continues to inspire, to move, and to remind us all that, truly, the show must go on. His story, once secret, now belonged to the world, a timeless testament to the power of art, love, and an indomitable spirit.